Okay, you ready to go?
Okay. All right. Today we're going to be talking about marketing and negotiating in the current market. But some of the things we're going to discuss is training, which I didn't bring into this, but I will discuss it just for a few minutes as we start. Jessica is going to be doing contract training. So if you're relatively new to the business, absolutely attend it. It's always a great refresher for any agents no longer, however long you've been in the business. So she's going to be doing part four tomorrow, and that's going to be on Zoom. So if you can make that meeting, feel free to do it. Some of these forms have changed. Some of it is minor, and some of it is just an adjustment as far as the existing form is concerned. But it's always important to be aware of that. Another location to go to is Snap. That's under the select group. And so when you go into that particular training module, and if you cannot access that, if for some reason you can't, then what we want you to do is reach out to your manager and have them work with you to get you into the program. The program is very good, has a lot of valuable information. And I have sat in on some of the instructors to get a feel for how they work. They are excellent. And it depends on what type of training you want. But what you do is you simply go to the uh, select group, and then from the select group, in the SNAP program will come up. That SNAP program then drop down to training and events. And when you reach that, it's going to bring up all the programs that's offered by the Select Academy. And it you will see in there it references Coldwell Banker and also C21. Just reach out to the one that you want to get on and attend those meetings. And some of them are actually recorded. So uh, my recommendation to you, if you don't feel comfortable with your contract that you're working with and you haven't recently worked with it, especially in the last few months, then I would recommend you to do an update in one of those programs. We do have resources here with the company to assist you whenever. And as you know, down in the Visalia operation, we have Adam has taken over that operation. We have a new manager over in the Hanford operation also. So if you're an agent, feel free to reach out to them. They're committed to spending more time in the office to assist you as you guys work in the real estate business. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about the price points. I did send out a memo on that and give you guys a break. Now, there's something I'm discovering that we have to be a little bit more careful with. When you look at the total MLS, it doesn't make any difference if it's the Rapatoni system or the one that's originated by TCMLS. If you're doing the whole system, those numbers are ranging differently than the local cities. So, and a good example is if you were working the data for the prior month, let's say, for example, in Fresno, you would be take it down to Fresno proper so that those numbers become truer if you're working on a house to sell it. So you have a better feel for it. If you were down in the Visalia area or in the Bakersfield area, it would be the same thing. Instead of doing the whole MLS wide, uh, take yourself down to the local area that you're working in. And then, for example, you would bring up Visalia or Bakersfield, Bakersfield proper. And that'd help you a little bit better because these numbers are adjusting differently. And at one time they were pretty consistent, but they are now substantially changing. Another thing that's happening is that the new construction is impacting our pending numbers. They're impacting our listing numbers and sold numbers. So always take that in consideration. I know it may sound confusing to you, but you have to look at everything. And you can see where new listings are coming on. You might see new construction. Horton is extremely active out there in the MLSs, and you may see 6 or 7 properties coming on in one day, and then a few days later, you may see quite a few pendings with the builder. So let's talk about new construction a little bit. They're paying commissions. They're paying commissions to the agent, but you definitely need to see what's happening now. Check to see what commissions are being paid. When you do that, that is individualized. So no matter who that builder is, it's going to be unique to that builder. It's not going to be across the board. We're getting some misinformation coming in where an agent gets confused, may have went out to a subdivision, didn't understand the commission structure, and then they're upset. And so every subdivision has its own commission structures. There is a few that are generic in nature, but you have to remember that it's not published in the MLS any longer. So you have to reach out to the builder. And so when you're working on that, just have some awareness. And commissions can change. In other words, they may be offering commissions this month, and maybe next month it's a different commission structure. It's all about, where they are in their market and the need for them to sell their product. Now, buy downs and incentives, some builders are offering this, they're offering this anywhere from, I'm seeing anywhere from 5,000 to 20,000. It's substantial. Some of it is caused by the builder themselves offsetting their price points by increasing them and then offering the incentives, but their profit margin is definitely going down. So, they're trying to move their product, so they're trying to get it through. Most of these companies are stock market driven, and they have to make their investors happy. So that's another thing you need to check, but you need to check that on that's not a company-wide in most cases. It could be individual houses. So let's say that they have 4 houses available, and of those 4 houses, uh, one has a different incentive than another. So you always need to ask the additional questions. Okay, and the incentives, which house has what incentive? Currently a lot of times it's a new build that's been completed, and the incentives have a tendency to increase against one that has to be constructed. So make sure you have a good understanding of that. We're seeing a lot of misinformation floating out. Inventory homes are historically been paying a higher commission. So if you're working in that arena, just have an understanding of it. Sometimes they don't, but sometimes you can always ask the question. And everything that I'm talking about here is the questions that you ask when you go out to new build. So we include the notes for you from this meeting, and it's a good guideline for you to utilize it when you're out looking at it, because you notice that in this, there's only about 5 key points. Some of the other things, of course, we don't do the sales. We don't go in and we turn those over to the sales reps when it comes down to the type of product they want and cabinets and so forth. Loan programs, the builders they buy down the interest rate, but we have to be careful. You have to put them back with that particular builder. Some builders are offering a 2-year buy down, some of them are offering 3 years, and it can vary. Now, with the buy down, the way it works is there's all kinds of incentive programs out there. One of them, free interest for a couple, 3 months. Others or maybe the rate is at 4.75, maybe it's something else. So they're buying down that rate for the first couple of years. So generally the rate will go back to prevailing at the end of that period. But that you don't provide that. In other words, if they're offering the buy downs, put them with the sales rep or their loan officer. And our company does have some affiliation with some of the local builders in these areas, so feel free to reach out to them. New construction. New construction is going to impact you if you have a listing in their geographical area. So it's important for you to understand that. If you don't understand it, what's happening is that particular client will have a tendency to go over to that new construction, take a look at it. So if you're working in a new construction area with an existing house and you're the buyer's agent, be sure and take them both to the new construction along with the existing house. It doesn't take that long, and it's better than you go in and get the customer signed up and then you're protected, because if that client leaves the house that you just shown and they go over to new construction, most builders will not honor it. I've come across a couple that said that they will, but I would never rely on that. Always go in and have them signed up. New construction, you notice today, is at the top of my discussion because it is the dominant part of this market, and it's carrying this market at a level we've never seen before as far as new construction is concerned. Existing homes. We're in a market that's strictly price, location, and condition. If it's a property that is in need of major repairs, it's probably will end up in an investor's hands. The buyer in today's market, what we're finding is they do have no desire to do repair work or don't have the ability to do it. So those type of really difficult properties to work with because of their condition, it's probably going to be investor driven, and you probably will unfortunately have to market to that arena. It's usually properties that are in a lower price range, and the investors now have the ability to take those properties and do work on them and make them marketable. Anything in the 300 up to 400,000 and 300 down, that market can see some deteriorating properties. But if you have a good property, it's generally going to be price, location, and condition is probably going to be tied to the high threes or the low fours, depending on your market area. It can vary in Fresno and Bakersfield and also in your Visalia market areas. So the market, we have more inventory and we have more competing properties. This is where some of our agents are failing because they're not staying current with the market on a weekly basis with their listing. And what we don't want you to do is have your client get dissatisfied with you and you're not staying in contact with them, and then they decide that they want to pull their listings, or if you are the buyer's agent and you're not up to date with the market on a daily basis, that it's going to become problematic. So just be careful with that. Interest rates, yes, they're adjusting on a daily basis. Now, there's only one thing I have to tell you about this is historically, as you all know, I sold for many years, but the market, if it's has have substantial price increases or reductions, it's not been major. It's just been a small amount, but it's staying in those sixes. But if you saw a big dip in it in a market and your client was working with a loan officer, then they may want to consider locking that rate and make sure that the lock is the only thing that you would bring up to them. Those locks need to be 30 days, 45 days, or 60 days. A lock less than 30 days is very difficult to work with. First time home buyers,
Oh, hey, Bill.
yes,
I just want to interrupt you before you get too far away from new construction. There was a question asked in the
yeah,
chat. Sydney said, I've noticed that some builders do pay the agent, but it comes out of the client's total incentives. So less money for them towards upgrades, potential buy down, etc. Is that common?
no. I'm surprised to even hear that. That's great information. I appreciate them getting that. Yeah, that's yeah, that one would have to be, I don't know who's doing that. But I can understand them going that route with it because you're asking the seller to pay the buyer's commission where in the past it was documented in the MLS, so they couldn't do that. Yeah, I haven't run across too much of that. I definitely be careful with that. That is an additional question to ask, and I'll put it in my notes for future training. I mean, if that's going on, that question needs to be asked when you're out there,
Yeah.
because that what it does is it comes right back at you as an agent, and the client's starting to question, well, why am I using you and paying a compensation to you? So it's definitely yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Everyone will have to pay attention to the CD very closely before they
Yes.
close.
Absolutely. You have to, yeah, you monitor that. That's great information. I appreciate it. The yeah, you run into these things. You never know what you're going to run into out there in the market, especially with new home builders. New home builders, they have a tendency to adjust house by house. So in other words, if you generally call them on a general basis, they're just giving you a broad picture of what it is, and then the individual house has a different type of format. So you have to get specific with it. Yes, thanks for that information. The interest rates, they're going to, we talked about that. The first time home buyers, it's a low down payment. We're now what I'm seeing most of is we're dealing with FHA predominantly in the lower market. We're looking at that 500 range on down. It's generally first-time home buyers and it's generally FHA. And VA is definitely in the market. Don't be afraid of VA. VA is, for all practical reasons, is real, the way they operate and function is pretty close to FHA. There's some old school psychological things about the difference, but there's really not too much. It's just some fee issues that need to be addressed, and the lender can address those on the client's behalf. With concessions, what you need to know is discuss with the seller if they have a property that when you list it and they're coming in over your comps, offer if they're rolling in over those, my recommendation to you is to see if you can get some concessions from that client. And because the main reason behind that is we're seeing that in new construction. And what's happening is our clients go out, they want 1 to 3% in seller concessions. Sometimes they need it, sometimes they don't. And then what they're doing is they're flopping over to new construction because new construction is offering it. So you lose the buyer because of that. So that's why I'm telling you to be very careful when you're working out in the market, especially with the buyer, that you understand where new construction's at. Because if it's in any geographical proximity, they're going to be attracted to it and they're going to be moved towards it. And we're also seeing with this new construction, they're doing a lot more marketing. They're on TV, they're on the social media, they're all over the place now. So trying to move their product. So understand that. But if you have a product that's a used market and you can offer seller concessions, then I would recommend it. Especially if you've been on the market for 30 days or more. Agents call me and talk to me about it. And I say, well, let's see if we can get some seller concessions in play. Maybe attract the buyer in. A small price reduction just historically does not work in today's market. Commissions. Seller, I would discuss this issue with the if that you need to discuss the issue right up front with your seller. Waiting till after the fact, you need to know where your seller's at. Sometimes sellers have gone onto the internet. There's so much information out there that it could be biased on their part on how they feel about paying the commission. What you need to understand when you're working with the seller is you have to run it by them. In other words, you have to talk to them right up front about the commission issue. If you're starting to see them bulk right out and creating, that they're not going to do it, or they're not going to do this, or they're not going to do that, then you know that you're going to have to get yourself into a negotiating mode when an offer comes in. The reason behind that is people want to negotiate, and people, buyers agents, do not want to pay commissions. And so, in most cases, and even if they agree to prior to the close of escrow, what I'm finding is it's getting very difficult to close that escrow out. So just be extremely careful with it. Discuss it with your seller if you have the seller, and see where they're at on it. That's basically what you need to do. You're willing to do it. Now, the reason why you're going to ask those questions is that what you're doing is in today's market, based on the amount of inventory that we're starting to run here, if that property is not a pristine property, it doesn't have price and it doesn't have location, it doesn't have condition going for it, you're going to have to be looking at concessions, and you're generally going to have to be looking at the commissions if your price point is not competitive based on the condition of the property and location. Understand market areas. Market areas is review your MLS in that market area and review it on a daily basis. So it's real easy to do. Just find a time that works for you on a daily basis, and I do it every day around 3 o'clock. Around 3 o'clock, I go in and look at all the new listings, all the solds, all the inventory, fall throughs. I look at them all. Doesn't take me very long, probably 10 minutes or so. And so I can get a good feel, excuse me, for how the market is working. Time on the market. I'm going to have a drink of water. Excuse me just a second. Time on the market, it depends on your price range. It's not, even though we send you information based on the total MLS, and it could be 50 days or 40 days or whatever it might be, the market conditions is built around competing inventory of homes. So you have to understand what is selling and about what the time range is. You need to discuss this with your customer. If they're over market, you're going to be longer on the market. If we can get ourselves competitive and maybe just a little bit under the current market MLS data, our potential to sell quicker is more important. So you need to understand what your client's desires are, their motivation to sell when they need to sell, because this is going to be geared to your property. A client that has no motivation to sell a property and has a price substantially higher, you have to really stop and think about, do you want to pursue this particular listing? Market conditions are always going to be an issue that changes on an ongoing basis. The condition of the property, believe it or not that long ago, a couple of years ago, which seems like nobody cared about condition. They just wanted to buy a piece of property and they wanted to get into it. That in today's world, it is very important that you understand the condition of the property, doing a CMA on it. And I realize we do CMAs, go out, talk to the customer, but you have to be careful with it. And when you do, you need to understand what you're dealing with. You need to understand the condition of the property and what's going on. The time on the market, it's a motivation of the seller. It's their motivation to sell. If they have no motivation, it's going to become difficult. I'm not saying don't list it. I'm just saying you have to understand what you're dealing with. So overpricing property is always going to be a problem. It's going to be difficult to sell in today's market. At one time, you could price it at any price and it would sell. It unfortunately in today's market, it no longer does that. So let's try to get all our listings marketed at the correct price based on your CMAs. Now remember what the customer is going to do. They're going to maybe go to Trulia or they're going to go to Homes.com. And what do we know about all that pricing? That pricing is not going to be current to your particular market condition. They have no clue as to what the condition of the property is when they're establishing value. So how do you handle that with the customer? You say, look, those are the analytics that are being done. They had taken no consideration as far as your property physically and size of lots and so forth, and a lot of different variables go into it. So you have to address that with your clients because I will tell you, your clients already have a feel for what they think their property is worth. Price reductions. The price reductions, small price reductions is problematic. I would never recommend it. The reason for it is every time you call a customer up about a price reduction, and if you do it on a weekly basis and you try to sell the story that it's marketing, in today's world, that's not the case. This is not a marketing where if you have a $500,000 house and you have a $5,000 price reduction. If that property is overpriced by 20,000, it should be brought into where it should be. When you're talking to your client about a price reduction, do a CMA. Send the CMA over to the client and then talk to your client on the phone about it so that you're in the right market range when you do the price reduction, and that's what will generate your sale. Multiple price reductions is not recommended. A good price reduction right from the start should be take care of it. If you're running in a property that's been on the market 2 weeks and it's out of whack, the bottom line on it is you need to change it. You need to get it to where it needs to be. Then you're going to find out the desirability of your client and how the client really wants to sell the property if it's overpriced. I do understand when you list a property, sometimes we do get a little carried away and we end up over listing just to get the listing, but all of us experience that. So let's talk about preparing the home for sale. Determine the repairs that are needed to be made by the seller. If you do all of these things at the time of listing, you're going to cut down the resistance. I do realize we run into these sellers and some of our agents, not so much with our company, but with other companies. They want to address these issues later. The repairs need to be addressed up front. An agent that goes into the property should be always pointing out any and every issue that needs to be addressed. Somebody said, well, do I do it before I list it or after I list it? Well, you can do it however you feel about working with your client. Most of the time it's done. We list the property and then we do a walk around with them and talk to them about different things, but it can be done before. There's nothing that says you can't. It's just about how you present yourself and, absolutely don't get condescending or anything like that, just working with your clients. Have this completed prior to taking the photos. The trouble I'm seeing with this is, and I'm starting to see more of it, and I'm not sure why I keep looking at this. Homegrown photos taken by real estate agents just does not tell the story in today's real estate market because you need you have to have not you have to have good pictures to draw the client to your listing, number one. If the listing is coming across as not presentable, and sometimes that happens when people are doing it off their phones, it turns the client off before they actually have a chance to look at it. I would always recommend use professional photos in today's world. But if you feel confident that you're as good as a professional taking photos, then go for it. Discuss ordering termite reports. Way too many issues coming up, and this is the biggie. The termite report is historically not going to be a problem on a newer home that's maybe just a few years old, but houses that have been in the market for 10 or 15 years or more is probably going to have some issues. But I would recommend it. Get it out of the way. Then you're not dealing with unknowns. You notice basically what I'm talking to you about is we're trying to un deal with these unknowns. We're trying to stop that. Landscaping needs to be freshened. This is not that expensive. Most people have yard people. The trim plants, you can seed the grass, you can add some bark, new plants, but the biggest one is just add new barks and trim the plants. I mean, that's basically all you need to do. Remove exterior items, personal pictures, excess furnitures. When you start working with your client up front to get the property ready to go, this is an opportunity to find out what you're dealing with as far as the client's concerned, if they have a willingness. If they don't have a willingness, you know that it could become more difficult to sell the property. And I'm not saying if you don't do any of these things, it's still okay. You can probably still sell the property because it's going to turn into a pricing issue. If the client wants maximum dollars, they need to do these things. And especially if it's if you using different formats to market the property, you got to be careful. Quality pictures, photos by qualified person and reviewed by the agent. We don't need 150 pictures. We don't need 111 pictures. We need 30 good pictures. If you're dealing with a house, it's probably 500,000. Maybe if you got that million two piece of property and you want to do 85 pictures, that's fine. Maybe the client insists on it. But your first six pictures needs to be your strongest pictures. You only need one picture of the front of the house in the first six pictures. And try to get a living room area, a kitchen area, maybe a backyard. It's got a pool, whatever. But historically, 30 pictures should get the job done. If somebody said, I don't want to do 30 pictures because a house is really rough. Well, my suggestion to you is let's talk to the client. Quality pictures. Quality pictures have to be done by a qualified person. The comment section, this AI, I know everybody's promoting it, but those remarks have to reflect the property. I go through the MLS prior to doing this training, and probably 75% are AI just as it was generated and no adjustments been made. My recommendation to you is it's fine to use AI. I have no problems using AI. I would use it. But then you need to, after AI has presented it, you go back and review it and see if it's consistent with your pictures that you've taken of the house. Somebody said, why would I do that? Because pictures are visual and when they look at the comments section, one's got to relate to the other. So make sure you do that and then you should be fine. Open houses. Open houses within the first 14 days of the listing. Okay, I do realize at one time in the first 14 days the house sold. So you never had to deal with it. But if you haven't been doing open houses, then you need to consider doing it again or having an agent do it for you. Doesn't mean you have to do your own. Find an agent within your office that has a willingness to do them and ask them to do it. It's part of your marketing program. You should have a marketing program for your client. And Failure to do an open house in the first 14 days, you generally will start having a client, if they're motivated to sell, is starting to question what's going on. So my recommendation is do it. And if you don't want to do it, then set a timeline that when you will do it. Let's say 21 days. And it just, work with your client on it. Maybe you want to do it in the first week, it's 7 days or whatever. MLSs, place time and date filtering on various websites. This is an unbelievable mistake being made by agents. In today's world, it's not about going into the newspaper or going on to social media. Social media absolutely could do it, but you want to get it out to Trulia, you want to get it out to homes.com, you want to get it out to all the various sites. Make sure you meet the timeline to get it posted. The posting needs to be posted as soon as possible. You should, if you're going to do it at 7 days from today, get it posted to set for that date, and then so it can shoot out to the websites. They are where customers are going in today's world. And social media, it has some value, but social media is unfortunately is being overworked and a lot of people are veering away from it. But there's nothing wrong with it. Agent customer contact base is very important in the sphere of influence. And neighbor flyers, you can drop off and take to neighbors. And also in the SNAP program, there is a program that will assist you in those arenas. You know, reach out to the things that you have available for you. You don't have to build a new program. They're here. You just reach into these various websites and find out what you need, and then you can build them almost instantly. Negotiating with the seller. Negotiating with the seller is a issue because they want their price in most cases. And when the offers are coming in less than the list price, and you have to be prepared to discuss all terms of the contract. Please do not call the customer up and start talking to them, and the first thing you say is price. What you need to do is and I do realize the customer wants to hear that, but an example, we have a property let's say, for example, that you have a listing. You said the offer comes in $5,000 under price. I have an offer for your property that I'd like to discuss with you, and then you go from there. But don't get hung up on the price, get hung up on the total contract. In other words, if it's a 30-day escrow, if it's a cash transaction, if it's pre-approved letters going with it, whatever it might be to induce the seller to accept that offer, if it's definitely fallen into the guidelines of a CMA. Always counteroffer what the seller will accept. Keep the offer alive. Very important. This is not a venue for two agents to start arguing. This is a venue for the seller to make the decisions and the buyers to make the decisions, and it has to be on paper. Uh, I Unfortunately, I end up working with agents that have their mind made up as soon as they get on the phone. My client won't accept it. Well, how do you know your client won't accept it? Have you done a counteroffer? No. Well, then do a counteroffer, and then let's see what they're willing to do. It's important to get in writing because it becomes a commitment. Communicating orally with people what they will accept and what they want is two different worlds when it comes to putting it in writing in most cases. Understand the seller concessions. If there's competing properties in the area, which in most cases would be new construction, but if there was competing properties in the areas that's being denoted under the agent comments section, then make sure that you understand it when you're working with your client because the client may drop off and go to the other property. So understand anything that's geographically in your area, be careful. Contingency sales are becoming more, we're seeing more of them. And you have to understand the process. If you don't understand the form, if you don't understand the form, reach out to your managers or reach out to training or training programs that would reflect that, and then make sure that you have hit all the spots that need to be hit on that form to make it effective because it can get to be very problematic. So, and it's a process. You know, you're linking properties together, you're linking escrows, you're doing a lot of things in that process that you don't normally do. Negotiating with the buyer. Discuss offers with the buyer, and it's the terms of the offer. We're not doing a good job in this arena. So, what we need to do is spend more time. And when you have the contract, I do realize that there's many pages tied to it. I just need you to highlight the important things. In other words, the price. The you know the price is definitely important. Type of financing is very important. Also, the timelines and contingency removals and everything. It's too often that we're working with clients and we get to 17 days and nobody was aware that they have a contingency removal that's going to have to take place. Those things should be done at when the offer is written. Point it out to your buyer. We're going to have to make sure that we inspect the property and do what needs to be done. So at 17 days, we can remove the contingency. The same way with the loan contingency. Pre-qualification lender, letters. Call and review with the lender. I would always do that. And if you're dealing with banks, be careful. Stay with your local lender that you're comfortable working with and have them because they're more in tune to be able to work with you and it's more of a personal basis working with them. 30 days on financing properties. We're having too many issues. Anything less than 30 days, you're probably going to have a problem. I'm not a cash transaction, that's a different world. But if it's financed or there's repair issues, it's going to have to take place no less than 30 days. The buyer's requesting repairs, the safety and health issues need to be corrected. Now, I'm seeing too much of this problem where people are not having a willingness to do repairs of any type. If you're running into that situation, try to get the health and safety issues taken care of. It's going to come up in if you're dealing with an FHA VA loan, you're definitely going to be dealing with it. So be careful in those arenas. Now, buyers concerned during escrows always discuss issue as soon as possible. This is going to get ugly quick because if a buyer has a concern, you find out what it is and let's get it resolved. Because if we can't, sometimes we have to communicate with the other real estate agent on the other side, letting them know where we're at on it. There may be an issue here or whatever it might be. Make sure that we do it and we are on top of that because that's how we build our relationship and that's how we get to closing and earn a commission. Texting is not a good idea. Call the customer and communicate information. Texting is it's an interpretive problem. So be careful with it. I do realize most customers are texting. I'll be honest with you, in today's world, I do much more texting than I ever have done in the past as far as communication is concerned. But if it's an issue, agents reach out to me all the time, and when they do, I generally will call them. I will call them and ask them, I want to know the background of what's going on, especially if I see that we have a potential fall through taking place, then I want to get them on the phone so I can talk to them about it as to why we're where we're at in the escrow and where the problem might be so we can solve it. That's what we do. That's our job. So on the next page, transactions to closing. The contract issues during escrow let's talk about escrow a bit. In today's world, what we're seeing more of, and I would recommend it, under the agent comments, put in there, if you're the listing agent, who the escrow officers you want it to be and which title company. Now, they have a right to, they can change it when they submit the offer, but they're more prone to stay with whatever you're working with and get that out of the way so it doesn't become an issue. Because if you once you know what the seller's escrow company needs to be, and sometimes they're very specific if they have a binder on the on it. So, but contract issues during escrow, it has to be between the buyer and the seller, and it has to be in writing. Agents do this repeatedly, and I mean, everybody's probably guilty of it at one time or another, but please stay away from it. The contract issue is between the buyer and the seller, not the agent. And the agents have a tendency to start posturing at time. It depends on who the agent is because they don't want to deal with it or they don't want to work with it. And my client said this and my client said that. And that's not really what needs to be done. You need to keep that separate. So the only thing that you as an agent would communicate with another agent is a form that you sent out that had been signed by your client and may want to do further explanation involving that form, but try to keep it at that. Contract contingency timelines. Removing the contingency on the stated date of the contract. So if it's 17 days, which is by default, if you change it to something else, then make sure that you have an escrow that's long enough to adjust to it, but remove it. If you got a problem with your buyer, guess what? If you're removing the contingency, they're going to tell you what the problem they have. That's what's important about it. Don't wait for the listing agent to send it over to you. You should do it, then talk to your clients and we got to remove the contingencies. Are we good to go? And that type of discussion. And it's really about the repair issues in today's market in most cases. The loan issues could be, I mean, it could be a problem there, but in most cases it's not. Stay in contact with your client. It's part of the negotiation process to facilitate the closing. It's so important to you as an agent to know where your clients are at. I do understand, you trying to get a hold of somebody and talking to them on the phone is very difficult in today's world. But what I'm finding more so that you can do, you can make the call. They'll respond back to you. They'll try to get back in contact with you. But the best way to do it is always communicating with them orally so you can understand what you're dealing with and you can ask probing questions when you need to. Email and text message, always call them. Property possession, final verification of the property. This one can get ugly. You got to be careful with it. We need some help in this arena. We've had run into some problems recently. Let's verify that the property is vacant. So you as an agent need to check and make sure the property is vacant. Make sure that there is no cars, trash, things are not, all that stuff needs to be removed. So the final verification generally is done 5 days prior to the close of escrow. Now, if the property is not vacant, which they can stay in there until the date of possession for the new buyer, be careful with rechecking the property. Always go out, do the final verification, get the client signed off, take a look around the property, start getting a feel for what is still there that could be a problem. The things that can be a problem is what we're seeing is trash and stuff on the outside of the house and that's not being removed. So, your newer houses shouldn't have a problem with it, but you never know. And then verify the property is vacant prior to turning the keys over. So I do realize that if it's geographically way out of the area, ask if somebody, when an agent is working that area. It's one thing about Select, we're all over the United States, so if they would have a willingness to go out and check for you. Solar systems, have copy of the solar agreement. I did training on this last week. I'm just going to touch on it because it's just such an important thing that we deal with. And if you need some additional assistance, feel free to reach out to me. Always have a copy of the solar agreement. It's unfortunate we don't. In some cases, working with other agents from other companies, our agents are doing a pretty good job, but we do an extensive amount of training with solar. So, and the main reason this company does it is because of the liabilities associated with it. So the solar systems, there's three distinct types. There's own, finance, and power purchase agreements. The own system will generally need to be paid off at close of escrow. We have had a couple of exceptions to this, but in most cases, it needs to be paid off. Lease, it can be transferred. We're not seeing too big an issue with this. They do require a FICO score, depending on who it is, anywhere from 640 to 660. I have found no turndowns on lease solar and once they've been approved for a loan, if a loan is involved. If no loan is involved, it could be a credit issue, could come into play. And then also on the lease thing, if the credit is lower than what they have indicated in the lease contract, they may charge anywhere from $200 to $400 as an additional fee. Power purchase agreements, they can be taken over after 5 years. We've negotiated a couple. Well, maybe, yeah, just a couple's only we've been able to do. They're very expensive to negotiate for buyout. So we don't recommend it to stay, have your client take it over at the end of 5 years. If they want to purchase it, they can. Always provide a copy to the lender for review. Some lenders don't require it, some do. It just depends. My recommendation to you is just send it over to them anyway. They have it in front of them. We don't want a problem with it when the underwriting is taking place. The underwriter needs to see it. Some underwriters request it, others don't. The property appraisals. The property appraisals are changing. We're seeing some properties, believe it or not making an appraisal, but yet we're seeing properties that are coming in a little bit over. It's not a big problem right now, but it could be as we move forward as time passes. I don't anticipate any huge price reductions in what we're seeing out there and what we're selling. You have to remember what you're selling is you have to understand it's not based on square footage. It's based on, you'll see houses that are under 350,000, for example, have a price that's higher per square footage than a house that is 500,000. Its price per square foot may be different. Two stories have a different price per square footage differential. So understand all the variables in this. So it's really what you need to be doing is you need to find properties that are somewhat similar to what you're working on. So what you're working on, let's say you're working on a single family, single story house, then you need to find comps within the area for that. Don't, I do, somebody said, well, how far? Yeah, I mean, you know, half a mile, quarter mile, a mile, it just depends. You're just going to have to go out to find what works. If you're in a rural area, it's a tough one. It's because they have a lot of issues tied to them. They could have sheds, they could have fencing, they could have all kinds of different variables. So that's a totally different situation. But working within the city, you should be able to get some comps that are relatively similar. Trying to use a two-story against a single story can be used. We see appraisers use that, but it just depends. Check for closing an area within a week of the appraisal. Always do this. You have to remember the appraiser is generally not going to run comps, and he's going to run those comps when he goes out to the property. So let's say he went out to the property 30 days ago, and you might see that appraisal. Here's what happens with it. Let me explain this a little closer so you don't get confused. You check for the closing the week that you appraise the property. In other words, you want to know if there's any properties in close proximity to the property you're appraising, whether it's single story or two story, or it has lesser square footage or more square footage. Just have some awareness of that property. Now, you don't have to get it down to the exact same size. If it's a 2,000 square foot house, we'd love to see it 200, 1,800 to 2,200 square feet. That would be the best scenario that we could get, and they were all single stories. But make sure that your comps make sense. And if you're using a comp it doesn't make sense, the appraiser's not going to pay any attention to it. Meet the appraiser at the property. My suggestion to you is put comps, put them in an envelope. Don't start showing them to him and starting an argument. And we're not supposed to be doing that anyway. We wouldn't want you to ever do that. But if you have three comps, put three comps in an envelope. Put a preliminary title report with it. You should have it by the time the appraiser shows up. It helps him out a little bit, and just put his name on it. If you're not there, put it on the countertop. At least it's there for him to pick it up. Put his name on it. Also, within that envelope, put the last 24 months of improvements that's been done on the property. They're not going to consider anything that's longer than that. Uh, I mean, but they will, and not air conditioning units is in most cases, they're not going to pay attention to that. But basically what they're looking at is let's say you redid the kitchen countertops, or you put new flooring down, new carpeting, you did painting, you just did things like that. And then put that in there so that they have that additional information. So basically, it's an interesting arena we're in today, and I appreciate everybody coming on today. And if you have any additional questions, you can always feel free to reach out to myself. And everybody have a great week this week, and let's see if we can put some deals together. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Bill, are you still on?
Yeah, I'm still on.
What I would add to that is I always bring the contract with counters because a lot of times the lenders will have the contract but not the final counters, and that's how you get those low appraisals where the final sales price don't match. And I usually try to provide that to the appraiser when I bring my comps and things out there.
That's very important. I didn't realize they were doing that. I mean, we're starting to miss some of these appraisals. It's not too prevalent. It's not like we used to see, but we didn't miss any for an extended period of time, and now all of a sudden we're seeing them, every once in a while. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's a good point. Yeah, it definitely, if you got a counteroffer in place, sometimes the counteroffer I'm seeing is getting separated from the title company. In other words, the agent doesn't notice that the price of the property had changed because the counteroffer wasn't provided to the escrow company.
Yeah, there a lot of times they get divided into separate emails, so that's where sometimes they get dropped off.
Yeah,
So,
that's a very good point, especially with the lender. The lender could be processing something that's off. Yeah, good point.
yes.
I'll bring it up at the next meeting. All right. Well,
Very good.
thanks a lot. Great
All right,
information.
guys. Have a good one, everybody. Stop.